2:17 local time. The thermal profile of a mountain shifted by less than 1 degree. Not an explosion, not a missile strike. A contained energy pulse buried beneath 80 meters of granite. 43 seconds later, a classified facility in Kerman province went dark. No distress call, no external alarm. Just silence where continuous encrypted traffic had existed for years. On official Iranian infrastructure maps, the site was labeled a logistics storage depot. In internal assessments at United States Central Command, it carried a different designation, Fortress 9. It was considered untouchable. 6 meters of reinforced concrete, triple-layered perimeter security, independent diesel power grid, internal water reserves, hardened blast doors rated to withstand bunker-busting ordnance, designed not to deter attack, designed to outlast it. At 2:19, interior surveillance feeds began dropping, one corridor at a time. Not the main halls, not the command atrium, peripheral systems first. A maintenance tunnel near the turbine chamber, a secondary power relay, a storage gallery adjacent to the lower access shaft. No external breach was detected, because the breach had already happened. Elements of the 75th Ranger Regiment were inside the mountain 27 minutes before the first system anomaly registered. Insertion did not come from the air. No rotor wash, no radar spike, no parachute silhouettes against the night. The entry point had been dormant for decades, a dry irrigation canal carved generations ago, later reinforced during early excavation of the facility, then forgotten in official schematics. Satellite density scans identified a variance in subsurface composition along the western slope. Engineers calculated void probability. Rangers confirmed it. By 1:52, the first team moved through a narrow stone artery barely wide enough for a single operator with a rebreather and suppressed platform. No radio chatter beyond essential signals. No visible light. Infrared only. Inside Fortress 9, the night shift rotation had just completed. Guards were repositioning. Systems checks were routine. Nothing in the command console suggested an external threat. Airspace was clear. Border activity nominal, regional posture stable. The assumption of safety remained intact. At 2:21, the first internal contact occurred. Not a chaotic firefight. A controlled 3-second engagement in a utility junction, 2 suppressed shots, 1 redirected burst. Bodies moved, access secured. The Rangers avoided primary corridors, bypassed motion-heavy sectors, and advanced through cable conduits and maintenance shafts mapped from partial construction archives and thermal modeling. Their objective was not the outer defensive ring, it was deeper. Fortress 9 was not primarily a weapons vault, it was a coordination hub. Beneath the second level sat a hardened operations core believed to synchronize regional unmanned systems activity and proxy force logistics across multiple theaters, drone routing schedules, signal encryption rotations, deployment authorizations, a brain protected by stone. At 2:24, the facility's internal network initiated a diagnostic sweep in response to localized outages. The sweep failed to isolate the anomaly. Backup circuits engaged automatically, sealing several blast doors, including some between the Rangers and their primary objective. The defenders did not yet understand they were sealing themselves in. By 2:27, the first alert reached the internal rapid response unit. They mobilized toward the mid-level junctions, expecting sabotage. They prepared for intruders at the perimeter. The perimeter remained untouched. Outside the mountain, nothing moved. No jets scrambled, no missiles launched, no armored convoys accelerated toward the site, because there was nothing visible to respond to. At 2:31, a secondary Ranger element breached a fiber relay chamber on level 3. Rather than destroying the node, they isolated and looped it. Surveillance feeds were frozen in repeating sequences, guards pacing hallways that were no longer empty. Time inside the fortress began to fracture. Security teams responded to ghosts. Corridors appeared clear on monitors that were no longer live. Orders were issued based on delayed reality. At 2:34, the Central Operations Floor initiated lockdown protocol Gamma. Internal bulkheads descended, pressure doors sealed. But Gamma assumed an external assault. This was not external. The Rangers were already below the lockdown line. In the turbine chamber, one operator placed a directed microcharge against a reinforced internal hatch. Not to blast it open, but to shear hinge pins silently. The door was removed, not destroyed. No shockwave traveled through the rock. No seismic trigger activated. Precision over force. At 2:38, gunfire echoed through a narrow vertical shaft connecting levels 3 and 4. Louder this time, contained but unmistakable. The rapid response unit had made visual contact. For 21 seconds, the mountain absorbed automatic fire. Then it went quiet again. When command staff inside Fortress 9 finally initiated a full internal alert at 2:41, they did so without situational clarity. They believed saboteurs had infiltrated a maintenance sector. They did not yet understand that the core operations node was less than 2 corridors away from being physically accessed. Above ground, dawn remained hours away. No smoke marked the horizon, no crater scarred the slope, no satellite image suggested violation. The fortress still stood. But by 2:44, its deepest layer was no longer secure, and the most heavily protected structure in the region had already been opened from within. 2:44 local time. Lockdown Protocol Gamma was fully active. Blast doors sealed level 2 from level 3. Internal pressure compartments engaged. Automated defensive turrets deployed along primary corridors leading to the operations core. All of it assumed the threat was moving inward. It was already beneath them. At 2:46, the Ranger lead element reached the vertical access shaft connecting level 4 to the hardened command floor. The shaft was designed for internal logistics lifts, narrow, reinforced, and monitored by thermal sensors calibrated to detect abnormal heat signatures. Those sensors were still functioning, but their data stream was no longer reaching the command console. 30 meters above, security officers watched a looped feed of an empty shaft. Below, 3 Rangers ascended in silence. No shouted commands, no fragmentation grenades, no rushing. Each movement calculated against structural schematics memorized during mission rehearsal. At 2:48, Iranian rapid response teams attempted to regroup at the central operations atrium. Approximately 30 defenders consolidated near the reinforced doors protecting the data vault. Communications between floors were intermittent. Backup fiber lines carried fragmented instructions. Confusion replaced coordination. They believed the breach point remained in the upper utility corridors. It did not. At 2:50, the first Ranger element emerged behind the inner defensive line. The engagement lasted 19 seconds. 2 flash diversion devices, disciplined automatic fire, controlled room dominance. When the smoke cleared, the defensive perimeter around the data vault no longer existed as a cohesive force. But the vault doors remained sealed. 6 inches of composite alloy, internal biometric locks, timed magnetic release protocols. Destruction was an option. Control was preferable. At 2:53, a specialized technical operator connected a hardened interface unit directly into the vault's external maintenance port. The system rejected remote intrusion. It was not designed to be accessed from outside the Iranian military network. So, the Rangers bypassed the network. Power to the biometric scanners was interrupted for 1.8 seconds, just long enough to trigger a fallback mechanical override mode intended for internal safety compliance. In that window, a precision hydraulic spreader forced microseparation in the locking frame without triggering the seismic tamper alarm. The door opened without an explosion. Inside, Fortress 9 revealed its true purpose. This was not a border logistics depot. It was a regional coordination hub. Wall-sized digital displays tracked unmanned aerial systems across multiple theaters, live routing schedules, encrypted frequency rotations, deployment queues for proxy units beyond national borders, drone launch authorizations time-stamped for the next 72 hours. The fortress was not built to defend territory. It was built to project influence. At 2:57, remaining Iranian personnel on Level 3 initiated an emergency data purge protocol. Internal countdown. 120 seconds to irreversible encryption wipe and storage destruction. The Rangers had expected that. Instead of targeting the main server racks, they isolated the power distribution manifold feeding the purge system. Rather than cutting power entirely, which would trigger automatic data corruption, they rerouted voltage through a portable stabilization module carried for that exact contingency. At 2:59, the purge timer froze at 0:17. Data remained intact. Above, scattered defenders attempted to mount a counter-assault down the central stairwell. They encountered interlocking fields of fire from 2 Ranger containment teams already positioned along choke points. The engagement was brief and contained within reinforced concrete corridors that absorbed most of the acoustic shock. Fortress 9 was still structurally intact, but operational control had shifted. At 3:03, Iranian Regional Command finally recognized the scale of the breach. External units were placed on alert. Convoys began mobilizing from secondary bases. Air defense radar along the province activated in wider sweep patterns. None of it would arrive in time, because the objective was no longer destruction, it was exploitation. At 3:05, a secure burst transmission left the mountain, routed through a high-altitude relay platform, and encrypted under pre-authorized contingency codes to United States Central Command. Core accessed, network live, purge halted. Inside the operations chamber, Ranger cyber specialists began mapping the internal architecture. The fortress was not a standalone system. It was a nerve node within a broader network. Satellite uplinks, proxy command chains, encrypted drone relays extending across borders. For years, analysts had attempted to model that architecture from the outside. Now, they were standing at its center. At 3:08, a critical discovery surfaced on one of the command terminals. A scheduled activation window for coordinated unmanned deployments in 3 separate regions within the next 6 hours. If left untouched, multiple operations would unfold before sunrise. The Rangers did not destroy the schedule, they altered it. At 3:10, authenticated command packets were drafted using captured encryption keys and internal authorization signatures. Instead of launch confirmations, cancellation directives were inserted into the outbound queue, formatted precisely as legitimate internal orders. Across distant airfields and concealed launch sites, systems received what appeared to be routine command updates. Stand down, delay activation, await further instruction. No alarms triggered, no one realized the source had changed. Back inside Fortress 9, remaining defenders were isolated to 2 upper levels. Their communications degraded to handheld radios with limited range. Attempts to retake the operations core failed against disciplined containment lines. The mountain still stood, the fortress still existed, but its purpose had inverted. At 3:14 local time, for the first time since its construction, Fortress 9 was transmitting commands it did not originate, and the outcome was already diverging from every scenario regional planners had prepared for. 3:14 local time. Fortress 9 was still operational, but it was no longer under its original authority. Inside the command core, Rangers worked in disciplined silence. No raised voices, no wasted motion. Every terminal was photographed, mirrored, and indexed. Every active network connection was mapped in real time. This was no longer a raid, it was a controlled seizure. At 3:17, the first confirmation arrived from an external relay. One of the scheduled unmanned deployments had entered a delay loop. Launch crews at a secondary site acknowledged updated command parameters without suspicion. Authentication strings matched, encryption keys validated. The cancellation had been accepted as routine. Inside the mountain, defenders still believed the objective was to repel intruders. They did not yet understand the intruders were rewriting operational timelines beyond the mountain's walls. At 3:20, a Ranger containment team on Level 3 intercepted a coordinated push by approximately 15 remaining guards attempting to descend through an auxiliary ventilation corridor. The engagement lasted less than 30 seconds. 2 flash diversions, controlled bursts. Survivors surrendered when cut off from reinforcement and communication. Resistance was fragmenting. At 3:23, cyber specialists isolated the outbound satellite uplink array embedded within the mountain's upper ridge. Instead of severing it, they established controlled routing authority. Any external signal entering or leaving the facility now passed through a monitored filter. Fortress 9 had become a listening post. Then came the unexpected layer. At 3:26, archive data within a restricted subdirectory revealed encrypted coordination logs between the fortress and proxy command structures operating across multiple regions. Not just unmanned systems, not just drone routing, strategic messaging campaigns, funding allocations, operational influence scheduling. The fortress was not only a military node, It was a synchronization engine. Destroying it would have erased evidence. Controlling it exposed architecture. At 3:29, a secure update was transmitted to United States Central Command. Network dominance achieved, secondary architecture expanding beyond initial assessment. The response returned within seconds. Exploit, maintain discretion, avoid structural collapse. That decision altered the trajectory of the mission. The original contingency plan included demolition of critical infrastructure and timed extraction under external air cover. Now, structural destruction would eliminate ongoing access. The value of the system had surpassed the value of its destruction. At 3:33, remaining Iranian command elements attempted to reassert control through a remote override sequence. The attempt failed. Authentication tokens had already been rotated internally. Rangers had not only intercepted traffic, they had assumed identity within the system. Across multiple operational theaters, previously synchronized cells experienced unexplained instruction delays. Some units paused movements, others postponed logistics transfers. Confusion began spreading outward, invisible and untraceable. Inside the fortress, time pressure increased. Regional quick reaction forces were mobilizing. Thermal signatures indicated vehicle columns moving toward the mountain along 2 separate access routes. Estimated arrival, under 90 minutes. At 3:37, Rangers initiated phased extraction of critical hardware, solid-state drives, encryption modules, portable server mirrors. But they left the primary infrastructure intact, because control was more disruptive than rubble. At 3:40, an unexpected signal appeared within the network. A priority-level transmission request flagged from a higher command echelon. Someone outside the fortress sensed irregularity. The Rangers faced a decision: block the signal, risking suspicion, or answer it. At 3:42, using captured credentials, a limited acknowledgement was transmitted. Not detailed, not explanatory, just sufficient to maintain procedural continuity. The request was deferred, suspicion delayed, time extended. On level 4, the operations chamber was now fully secured. 47 defenders had surrendered across multiple levels. Casualties remained limited compared to what a conventional breach would have produced. The fortress still stood structurally intact. Power remained online. External sensors continued feeding outward as if nothing extraordinary had occurred. From orbit, the mountain appeared unchanged. No crater, no smoke, no signature of assault. At 3:47, Rangers initiated staged withdrawal from upper levels, collapsing internal access paths behind them without visible destruction, doors resealed, corridors obstructed in ways that suggested internal malfunction rather than hostile entry. They were erasing evidence of their presence while maintaining invisible control. At 3:51, a final data synchronization cycle completed. Network maps extended beyond initial projections. What had been believed to be a regional coordination hub was in fact a cross-border synchronization node, linking multiple decentralized operational centers. The strategic surprise was not what the fortress contained, it was how much it connected. At 3:55, extraction countdown began, not under fire, under silence. Above ground, approaching vehicle columns were still minutes away from visual contact with the site. Air defense systems remained active but untriggered. Radar operators saw nothing abnormal, because nothing had exploded. At 3:58, the first Ranger element began exfiltration through the same subsurface channel used for insertion. No helicopter insertion lights, no visible withdrawal. Inside Fortress 9, the network continued functioning. But the commands it would transmit over the next hours would not originate from those who built it. And across the region, operations that were expected to ignite before sunrise would instead stall, without any public explanation. The fortress had not been destroyed, it had been repurposed, and no one outside the mountain yet understood that the most secure facility in the province had already changed hands. 04:02 local time. The last Ranger element cleared the subsurface canal and sealed the concealed access point behind them. No blast, no collapse, just stone restored to stillness. Above the mountain, nothing moved. At 4:07, the first Iranian quick reaction convoy reached the outer perimeter of Fortress 9. External guards reported internal communication irregularities but no visible breach. The structure stood intact. Power remained active. Air defense radars continued rotating across the dark horizon. From the outside, the fortress appeared operational. Inside, it was empty of intruders, but not free of consequence. At 4:11, Regional Command attempted a full system integrity check. Diagnostic pings traveled through the internal network. All primary nodes responded. Authentication keys verified. Command hierarchy appeared unchanged. What they could not see was the silent architecture layered beneath. Monitoring routines embedded during the 40-minute seizure window. Outbound traffic mirrored through covert relay pathways. Command permissions subtly restructured. Fortress 9 had not been sabotaged. It had been instrumented. At 4:18, multiple external operational cells across the region reported unexplained delays in previously synchronized deployments. Drone launch authorizations remained pending. Funding transfers stalled in queue. Encrypted communication relays returned acknowledgement requests without full execution. No alarms triggered, no system failure message appeared, only hesitation. Inside regional planning rooms, officers searched for technical faults, weather interference, satellite misalignment, encryption drift. No immediate anomaly surfaced, because the anomaly was human. At 4:26, an emergency internal review convened within Iranian command channels. Preliminary assessment. Possible internal malfunction triggered by a localized security breach. No evidence yet of foreign presence. No visible destruction. The most secure installation in the province had not been attacked in a way doctrine recognized. That uncertainty was more destabilizing than damage. Meanwhile, secure channels at United States Central Command processed live data streams flowing quietly from within Fortress 9. Network maps expanded across displays, proxy linkages visualized. Operational synchronization timelines projected in real time. The seizure had lasted under an hour. Its visibility would last indefinitely. At 4:39, a higher echelon override attempt was initiated from outside the province. Full administrative reset of the Fortress network. If successful, it would purge recent command anomalies and restore centralized control. The reset failed. Not dramatically, not explosively, it simply stalled. Authentication tokens did not align with current internal configuration, because the configuration had been rewritten during those 19 silent minutes inside the command core. By 4:52, suspicion hardened. Orders were issued to physically inspect the lower levels of Fortress 9. Internal security teams descended toward turbine chambers and maintenance corridors. They found sealed doors, deactivated cameras, signs of controlled internal engagements. But no intruders, no explosives, no structural devastation. The evidence suggested presence without destruction, penetration without collapse. At 5:07, as dawn approached, satellite imagery still showed an undamaged mountain. No international headlines, no public acknowledgement, no dramatic plume marking a strike. And yet, across multiple operational theaters, synchronized initiatives had stalled or misfired. Timelines fractured, confidence wavered, the fortress still stood. But its reputation did not. By 5:19, Iranian command made the decision to temporarily suspend several external coordinations functions, pending full forensic review. That suspension rippled outward, compounding the hesitation already induced. Operations that had relied on Fortress 9 as a secure synchronization node were forced into manual redundancy. Manual systems are slower. Slower systems create gaps. Gaps create vulnerability. At 5:34, the first internal report reached senior leadership. Probable hostile access achieved. Duration unknown. Structural integrity intact. Network integrity compromised. No casualty figures could quantify the damage. No crater measured its scale. The outcome surprised not because of destruction, but because of restraint. The Rangers had not reduced the mountain to rubble. They had not triggered a retaliatory cascade. They had not left visible fingerprints. They had altered the equation. In strategic analysis rooms days later, the realization settled with greater weight than any bomb could deliver. Depth does not guarantee security. Concrete does not ensure control. Silence can be more disruptive than fire. Fortress 9 continued operating in the months that followed, but every command transmitted from it carried doubt. Every synchronization cycle was questioned, every encrypted packet suspect. The strongest fortress in the province had not been breached in a way that inspired outrage. It had been accessed in a way that inspired uncertainty. And in modern conflict, uncertainty is a force multiplier no wall can contain.